Okay, so we're joined right now by somebody who used to be in a gang in Chicago, who went to prison for 20 years for murder, and he thinks that TDA is such a problem in the city that he fears an all-out turf war is about to break out between the TDA and local Southside gangs. Tyrone Muhammad is with us. He's now part of a group called Ex-Cons for Community and Social Change, Ex-Cons for Trump. Thank you so much for joining us. So why do you believe that a turf war might be imminent?
What you have to thanks for having me, Jesse. What you have to understand is that Chicago gang culture is not like what it used to be, where during the Clinton 1994 crime bill, you removed men who actually controlled the streets, that was rather respectful to his neighbors as well, if that's not oxymoronic, right? Rather respectful, and also had a link to the communities that they lived or was involved with. Now you have a situation where we have now cliques, crews, and sets that don't follow certain guidelines and structures that were set by founding gang leaders and founding gang literature, right? So what happens is now you get these new gangs, these new terrorists. I call them terrorists because the very fact that you can allow people to cross our borders and potentially harm American citizens that go unchecked with no regulation and then placed in communities that's already disinvested and violated by the policies of this current administration in Chicago and big cities and throughout this country is a violation of democracy and really treason. And with that being said, now these young men don't live by those same codes. And these guys come in, they blend in with the Puerto Ricans, the Mexicans, and other Latin Americans, and they're integrating into their gang culture. And what they're doing is starting to set up in our various neighborhoods, taking over abandoned buildings, taking boards down, making those buildings their own, and then setting up outside of the shelters that they're in to pretty much as a way of tagging those blocks and communities to say, hey, this is our turf. And before long, if we don't get in front of this, there will be a powder keg of bloodshed. Because there's already a disconnect in terms of culture and language. And just being in Chicago and the policies that has allowed the influx of migrants in our community, while we have a vice president who claimed that she arrested and locked up transnational gangs, yet the policy of her party that she support inundate our communities with criminals that come from these countries that we don't even know where and who
where they're coming from, who they are. And I want to talk about what you're seeing, because I think this is the kind of headline that a lot of Americans around the country read and say, oh, that's too bad for their city, but it won't happen in mine. Well, now it's in Chicago. So what are you seeing?
So what you're saying is, what they need to understand is violence anywhere is violence everywhere. Mm-hmm. And I said when they first came in that the mixture and the blending of the gang cultures will be a toxic mix. And what I mean is, once these members learn the city and they use the resources of our tax dollars and revenue to buy cars and to buy guns and to set up drug operations and prostitution rings in downtown Chicago, we're about to start seeing the beginning of hell in Chicago.
I know the city spent nearly, $500 million on 42,000 migrants that have been here in the past few years. When you've sounded the alarm, you say the city's going to go up in flames. Yes. You even warn about bloodshed. Yeah. What exactly do you mean by that? I mean, at what point do we get to that boiling point?
Gang culture isn't the same as it used to be in the 80s and 90s, where you can identify one group or faction or leader that can then curb the violence or the incidents that may spill over into one gang community or territory. Now you have sects, cliques, cultures, and groups that now operate independently. Now, when you have all of these different fashions, it's like when you kill the queen bee, the nest or the wasp, it goes crazy. The nomads run wild, right? And then now you bring in a culture that don't speak the same language, that has a different concept of how to survive differently than we have. I actually say we have been pretty spoiled. These guys are serious and notorious criminals. The only other thing to do is no association. It becomes fighting for meager resources and territory. They set up on these blocks and on these street corners and these abandoned buildings as a way of flagging to say, hey, we're here and this is a way we're going to identify ourselves.
And tell me, you're now using your past pain, your past wrongdoings to help other people, former gang members, inmates. So how are you using what you know to combat what you're seeing in the streets? Are you helping these trained to arrive? I mean, how do you go about the problem?
Our goal is really to educate the young men, the at-risk youth, and the people in the community of how not to respond. And that's hard to do when we have limited resource to even touch the communities, right? And the biggest thing of all is that we're watching how our elected officials, how the policies of systemic disinvestment in Chicago and black people religiously voting for one party while the policies haven't created great solutions for that condition. So that's why when we started ex-cons for Trump,
I know. I was wondering where your shirt was today. You're usually done in something different than the suit.
This is how I like to dress every day. But the work don't allow us to be in the. I have to be in the community with the people.
Yeah. And let me ask you about being in the community with the people. Do you feel threatened?
No, absolutely not. I've been in a street gang and been in the communities and seen violence all our life. And this is what we talk about. We talk about terrorism in other countries and fighting terrorism, while our government, this administration, in every major city allows the terroristic effects of violence to inundate our communities. And now you've allowed terrorists to come over in the name of migrants who we have no connection to, and our resources are going to serve them and not us. Yeah.